Everybody, thank you so much for joining us. It's the the day after spring forward, so I'm sure everyone's thinking, oh hell, is it really 6 o'clock? But it is, and I'm so excited that Meghan Greeley is here to join us from Newfoundland, which is a bit later than we are here. So we have another hour and a half before we reach your time. Meghan, thank you so much for joining us. I'll start with a land acknowledgement before we get into our conversation. Junction Reads exists in Toronto, which for thousands of years has been the traditional land of the Wendat, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, and the Anishinaabeg, including the Chippewas and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit. Meghan joins us from Corner Brook, Newfoundland, on Akdamguk, the unceded traditional territory of the Beothuk and the Mi'kmaq. This land is still home to many Indigenous peoples from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on their territory. Thank you so much, Meghan, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to talk about JAWBONE. It was a short but emotionally jam-packed novel. And I'm excited. Somebody here today might win a copy from Radiant Press. So we'll see. But before we officially get started, I would love to hear what you're reading right now.
First and foremost, I'm reading 10 original plays written by my students. I'm teaching at the Grenfell campus of Memorial University right now in their theater program, and it's an acting program primarily, but I'm teaching a master class with them as well as directing a production. And so the master class is all about playwriting for actors. And so all of the plays that the students are developing are hopefully ones that they can potentially direct themselves in the future or perform in themselves in the future. I'm directing Orlando, a Sarah Rule adaptation of Virginia Woolf's novel. So I've been slowly picking my way through that novel. I'm afraid to read the novel. I finish it before I'm done the play because I don't want things that are in the novel to make me feel like something is missing from the play. I want to focus on the text as we have it in front of us. So slowly picking away at that. And I'm also reading Mudflowers by Ali Waterman, which was just longlisted for the Winterset. And Ali is actually from my hometown of Corner Brook, Newfoundland and Labrador as well. It's a gorgeous book so far.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm excited. I think this is the first time that an author has joined us and recommended plays, which I personally love to read. So I'm excited. Kaylee will share links to those for everybody so you can go out and find them somewhere.
Fabulous.
Before we hear you read from JAWBONE, I'm going to share your biography with everybody, if that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Meghan Greeley is a writer, performer, and director. JAWBONE is her debut novel, published by Radiant Press in 2023. Her play Hunger was published by Breakwater Books in 2022 and was shortlisted for the 2022 Winterset Award. Playwriting credits include JAWBONE, The Cut of It, Hunger, To the Girls, The Blue Castle, Brother, Brother, and Kingdom. Meghan holds a BFA in theater acting from Sir Wilfrid Grenfell College. Recent directing credits include Maiden Voyage and Mallory Clark's play Motherskin, a past member of the Tarragon Playwrights Union and Nightwood Theatre's Right from the Hip program. You can find more of Meghan's work and check out the White Rooster Theatre in St. John's, Newfoundland, where she is currently artistic director. That was such an exciting biography to read and brought me deep, because I love theater, so brought me deep into the White Rooster and everything that you've got coming and everything that you've produced in the past. It's quite exciting. But for now, we get to hear you read from JAWBONE.
Great. So the reading that I've selected is not starting at the beginning of the play, but starting on page 11. So we're actually, I'm just realizing that page 11 is also chapter 11. The chapters are very short. They're sort of written as fragments. So that's where I'll be starting. Tasks that take roughly 1 minute to perform. Microwaving a small portion of leftovers. Finding the correct key on a keychain of many identical keys. Trimming the stems of 1 dozen roses. Walking down 7 flights of stairs. You concocted this list. We were draped over the air conditioner, remember? Wrapping ice cubes in cheesecloth and sucking them dry. We barely knew each other when that first heat wave hit. I hadn't unpacked all my boxes yet, but the heat was our common enemy. It was one of the things that made us fast friends. The days were so hot that we kept wine in the freezer and ate it with spoons. We were dizzy with dehydration, so we drank. We were listening to the radio. We did that together, listened to the radio. They were explaining the rules for the application process. Everybody was talking about it in those days. It was the only thing that anyone was talking about. Nobody could wrap their brains around the science nonfiction. A 1-minute audition, I said. How to summarize the self in a minute? That isn't even enough time for the crazies to reveal themselves, for the judges to weed them out. Are we still allowed to use that word? Crazy, you said, rolling ice cubes in your hand like dice. But I mean, yes, every single person who applies will be a little bit crazy. They'd have to be. Was the first cosmonaut crazy? I said when he launched into space. Yuri Gagarin, you retorted, believed he was coming back. Mars, you said, is a one-way trip. A journey to Mars is forever. 12. It took us only a few minutes to decide during our first conversation that we should live together. We started late because you were late. When you finally blew into the rehearsal space, you apologized. You were late because a homeless man had spat in your face. There were still remnants of it, a long brown streak down your cheekbone. He was chewing tobacco, you said. You were startled because the pedestrians around you pretended to not see. You stood there, frozen, music still coursing through your headphones, while the man wiped his mouth on the back of his hand and retreated under his blue tarp. You weren't mad at the homeless man, you said. You had heard strange mutterings from under the tarp. You thought he was mentally very far away. You didn't say mentally ill. You said very far away, like he wasn't sick. He was just traveling. You were mostly angry, you said, at the passersby, too anesthetized to react. We waited until you came back from the washroom, your face scrubbed clean and raw. The color had risen in your cheeks from the friction of the harsh paper towel, the pink industrial hand soap. You apologized again, but the room was on your side. Suddenly, there were sides. If a homeless man spat on me, said the director, I would have turned around and walked home again and sterilized my skin in boiling water and bleach. If I saw a homeless man spit on a young woman, said an actor, I'd like... And he clicked his tongue on the roof of his mouth, like the plop of a leaky tap. You flinched and said nothing. You sat in the folding chair beside me. When the director paused to check an email, you leaned toward me, asked me for hand lotion. Your face was stinging from the soap. I said it was scented. Was that okay? Musk, maybe strong for the face? But you accepted the little tube and massaged your cheek. Ah, you said. Now I smell like a man. You opened your sketchbook. I'm the costume designer, you said. You've got shoulders like a velvet hanger, you said. You said, where did you and his shoulders come from? But you didn't ask me. You asked the me that you were sketching on the page, the costume you were hanging there. I said, I'm new. I said, I'm subletting a basement up north. You nodded, cocking your head with each pencil stroke. You were very focused on my clavicle. I heard there were over 100 applicants for your role, you said. You must be dynamite. I lowered my voice. I think I was hired because I was the only person who auditioned who could play the concertina. Apparently that's an important part of the script. You grinned. Your pencil hovered over the silhouette of my throat, the lines more slender than reality. You said, did you move here alone? I said, my boyfriend moved to California to study civil engineering, or maybe chemical engineering? I'm not sure which. Now it's too late to ask. I'm in too deep. I said, he moved there and I moved here, and now he writes me emails and it's very romantic. You said, why didn't you move to California? I said, I didn't want to live in a perfect climate because then what would I yearn for? You looked up from the page me to the real me. Oh, Velvet, you said. Have I got room for you? 13. Mine would be the bigger room. Your previous roommate, you said, had been a medical student, had been selected for a residency somewhere out west. I stood in the doorway, taking in the room's high ceilings, the healthy philodendron that she'd left behind, perfectly centered on a curtain rod in one of the tall windows. I didn't know it was called that yet, philodendron, but you knew plants and how to take care of them. In the living room, a jade pothos you'd had for years filled all the way to the floor. You did not abandon things. I thought of the tiny brown mushrooms growing under the baseboard heaters in my current apartment. I thought, perhaps I can cultivate a greener sort of garden. The landlord is an ass, he said, but I like buildings that existed before Technicolor. I looked at the wide crown moldings and their ornate millwork at the corners, the cracks in the plaster. What year was it built? I said. The landlord said it was pre-war. Which war? Why do we say pre-war, as though the war's ever stopped? You grinned at me from the threshold. Velvet, you said, please move in with me. In a city of strangers, it felt nice to be your chosen one. This is your home, I said. You should at least take the bigger room. It has more windows, more light. It'll be your room now, you said. And then you raised your arm, showed me the cosmos of freckles there. Besides, I'm a redhead, you said. I've got to keep these babies in the dark. 14. Baby, I'm so glad to hear that you found an apartment with a nice girl. I think it would be very good for you to make a female friend. I've noticed that you don't really have any. Sometimes girls feel that they just get along better with men, but this is problematic, misogynist even, as they are essentially trying to be one of the guys and are distancing themselves from the tenets of their gender. Women do not have to make themselves men to advance in society. Women can just be women. And I think it would be wonderful for you to have a girl to do things with and to talk about work and life and boys. Ha ha. Love, D. 15. That first night, I ate my dinner alone, washed my dish, and returned it to its cupboard. Half an hour later, you ate your dinner alone, washed your dish, and returned it to its cupboard. You knocked on my door and said, I'm thinking of making gulab jamun for dessert, but only if you help me eat it. You would learn how to make it in Nepal. I have this good recipe, you said, but maybe you know a better one? I hadn't been to Nepal and didn't know what gulab jamun was, so I said I wasn't hungry. I said I wasn't hungry, so I didn't have to say that I wasn't cultured or interesting or well-traveled. You closed the door and I read a little bit about Nepal. You didn't make gulab jamun that night. We listened to different music in different rooms with the volume low. When we passed in the hallways I unpacked, we apologized for nothing and walked around each other. Wherever I stepped, the floors creaked. You, an old cartographer of the more problematic floorboards, floated in assured silence. I smiled at you once as I passed, like we were two guests at the same hotel. It's hard, someone once told me, to make new friends once you're an adult. I knocked on your wide open door and asked, would you mind if I took a bath? You said that I didn't need to ask. I just wanted to make sure you didn't have to pee, I said. The word sounded juvenile coming from my mouth. I could always pee on the ficus, you said. Right, I said. The freckles on your nose scrunched together. I'm kidding, Velvet. You're shy for an actor. I'm not quiet once you get to know me, I said. When I returned to my room afterward, wrapped in a bathrobe, the closet door was shut. I stopped because I hadn't shut the door. I definitely hadn't shut the door before. Or had I? Then the closet was a living thing. From inside came muffled giggles, and I stood there, hair dripping. I stood there not knowing whether to open the door and say something like, "Jig's up." But then you giggled louder, and I knew you knew I could hear you, and that this was always the point, an offering. You were trying to blast your way through the bow shock of the universe, where the interstellar winds mean no more boundaries. I began to giggle because we were both in on it. The joke was ours. It was ours. You tumbled out of the closet, and then I wasn't quiet anymore. Hi, baby. Thanks for your email. I'm enjoying this new epistolary phase of our relationship. Very Dickensian, don't you think? The play sounds interesting, though I admit that the concept may be over my head. I am, after all, a mere plebeian. While I know what the words your director used to describe his concept mean individually, Chekhov, live music, technocratic dystopia, eco-poetics, Anthropocene, maximalism, borscht, I admit that I can't quite picture how they all work together to form a cohesive play. But that is why you are the artist, not me. You know what I was thinking about today? That time we drove up the coast to see the drift ice. I'd never seen ice like that before. Nothing like that in the old country. Haha. I'm attaching a photo I took of you that day in your red coat. I miss that smile. Love you always. D. 17. You sewed buttons on a costume. There were dollar store reading glasses on your nose. You looked old and wise. You said you hated to work with your hands when your brain wasn't stimulated. I suggested Netflix, audiobooks. John Flattery, I said, he does audiobooks. A Farewell to Arms. You said, fuck Hemingway. You said if I never read another Hemingway novel in my life, it'll be one too many. You said, read to me while I sew. I like your voice better than John Slattery's. You told me there was wine in the fridge, a big juice box of it. You said, let's get drunk and get literary. I plucked a book from the shelf and said, I found this book inside a barbecue. I found it inside a barbecue, I said, at a dead man's estate sale. It felt like a good story. I felt like the story made my life sound a certain kind of way, like it featured certain kinds of characters. When my old drama professor died, I said, telling the story, the paramedics struggled to open the door. There were books stacked floor to ceiling, 4 rows deep. There were books in the kitchen cupboards, books in the bathtubs. Get out, he said. No one knows how he washed. He owned 2 cars, one in his garage and one in his driveway. The one in his driveway was the one he drove. He kept crisp white driving gloves in the glove compartment. Imagine, a glove compartment used for gloves. The second car was an empty shell. He'd removed the engine, gutted the interior of its seats, and filled it with books. When he died, they opened the doors of the house and the garage and let us glean new literature from a hoarder and his habits. I found a book in the backyard, over old charcoal, like dinner was waiting. Sex at Dawn, How We Mate, Why We Stray, and What It Means for Modern Relationships. I stopped the story. I didn't say that I had accidentally imagined the book in his hands. I didn't say that I had accidentally pictured him reading it in bed, maybe one hand in the book and one hand somewhere else. I didn't say that this made me feel queasy, probably because he was dead. I just said, the brain aneurysm killed him in less than a minute. Later, when you were concocting your list of things a person can do in a minute or less, you remembered the story. It takes 1 minute or less to die.
Thank you so much. I just hope that everyone listening heard that and thought I have to get my hands on this novel, because it truly is a journey, a fantastic journey. We'll open, because you talked about the fragments, we'll open talking about structure. It's such an important part of fiction writing, I think, seeing how words are laid out in their final product, whether it's, you know, a 3-part novel, a 5-part novel, or a novel written in 76 fragments, as JAWBONE is. But some of them are so short that the emotional impact is just incredible, like incredibly defined by that one moment. I just want to share with everybody the probably first but not the last time that I actually put this novel down and stared up into space and thought about your words. This is just one entire fragment or chapter. For as long as I can remember, I have concocted email passwords from the things of which I am most deeply ashamed. This way, I will never forget. I was literally like, oh my God, okay, that's fantastic. Because before that moment, I thought about the structure and I thought it could have been written as a letter to her roommate, it could have been written as a kind of like stream of consciousness monologue, given she's an actress, but you chose this way and it's so perfect, absolutely perfect. And I wanted to talk to you about that. How did you know what went where and what belonged together?
That's a great question. A lot of the writing for this piece was intuitive. I was sort of writing it as I was going through a very late in life coming out. And so I was going through a lot of really tumultuous things in my personal life. And there was almost an urgency in the writing of it. And I think because I was sorting through my own feelings and my identity, my relationship to myself, my relationship to others, my relationship to someone that I felt myself falling in love with, I was very focused on singular details and pulling those to the surface. So for me, the importance wasn't, the any one scene and what the backdrop was, or what was happening, who said what. So often the important thing about the scene was one fleeting takeaway that the character had from it and what stuck with her. And it's not an autobiographical piece by any means, but there are a lot of autobiographical things in it. And in the writing of it, I also found myself pulling from a lot of old works, like scraps of I wouldn't say journals, but just little observations that I'd written about myself. But the email password thing was, I can't remember if that was in the original draft or a later draft, but was something that I found myself doing in life. I was almost 30 and I still, was using this as a method to remember what my passwords were. And I
Wow.
thought that's really dark. That's really disturbing. So I thought that this was something that felt right for this character as well, going through a similar journey.
There are many, for everyone watching, there are many moments that really pack a punch. But another thing that I found jarring, comforting, provocative, like all of those things, was how sensual the novel was. And again, I don't know if this speaks to how, who you are as a writer, what you wanted to infuse for Velvet, as she's known throughout the novel. The butcher scene was both visually and like, I don't know, I couldn't believe she didn't faint in cleaning up that all the blood or whatever. But smell, I think, is one of the senses that's carried through the whole novel. And in the very beginning, when she's watching her roommate in her room, there's a scene where she smells Velvet. The character known as Velvet smells ancients and ceremonial pyres, the magma of the earth, dusk falling over a deep canyon, and firelight. And even though those images don't come up necessarily as like a smell to the reader, I felt that, like I felt the smell as emotion. And I wanted you to talk to us about that, about your use of smell as an emotional conveyor belt, I guess.
I was interested in the writing of it as I was interested in synesthesia for sure, which is mentioned in the novel, but I think there are two things happening for the character. She's going through this awakening, and so it's almost like she's noticing all of these earthly sensations and earthly desires for the first time, because she's finally coming out of, I think for her, someone who's so not just repressed but almost compressed. Like she's so compact, everything is so tightly beat down in her that she's slowly starting to figure out what's popping out between the cracks as she's opening her eyes to her new identity and this love that she's feeling for her roommate. And even though she doesn't understand initially that it is love or it is desire. And so there's that, but there's also this focus on those earthly sensations, because she's thinking about losing or leaving Earth forever. So what are the smells of Earth? What are the sights and sounds of Earth? What are the things that you would never smell again? Like there's a passage where she's describing the scent of what the first astronauts on the moon commented on as they said moon dust smelled like gunpowder. And she was imagining years from now what a civilization on Mars might look like. And she says that the smell of a red to them will just be red. They won't know what a rose smells like. They won't know any of these other red things. It'll be like what we think of as, red candy. What is that flavor? But yeah, so they won't have the same associations with certain words that we have.
Right. Yeah, I love the maraschino cherries thing. I was just like, yeah, I always forget that things like that exist. Like humans consume these things. But anyway, that's a side thing, sidebar. Mars, since you brought it up, I was so I don't know. I just thought it was such a great idea. It was just such a great way into the novel that this character has applied to go on this one-way journey to Mars. And I want you to tell us where that came from. I want you to without, yeah, I guess you don't have to go into affecting a reader's interpretation of it, but what inspired you to have a character applying to go to Mars?
I think I was first interested in that idea when years ago there was a public announcement that I think it was called Mars One, may have been a Dutch company, that they were going to be the first to send people to Mars, and that it would be a one-way journey, that they were going to accept audition tapes for it for the first, I think it was 4 passengers at a time. They would send 4 in the first, it's been a while, I think it was 3 years, and then another 4, and etc. But you can never come back. And I remember feeling so intrigued but horrified by that prospect, because if you are leaving Earth and everything you know, and there's no contact with anyone back home except, any kind of communication that you can send via satellite or whatever, with a long wait time in between the signal, kind of like, the something even slower than the speed of light getting to us from the sun. It just felt to me like a kind of death. Who are you if you strip everything away? And I think that's the appeal of this journey for the character, because to her it's fascinating in a kind of morbid way. To her it feels like a punishment, and she describes it as the ultimate penal colony. So I was interested in that for a long time. And when I didn't finish a master's in screenwriting at York University. And in a screenwriting for television class that I was doing, I pitched a show and developed a show that followed a group of people that would be doing a similar program, leaving Earth. And so, it was always something that was in the back of my mind. And then when I started writing these fragments, almost without knowing what I was doing, it was so intuitive, and I didn't really have a plan for it in the beginning. That storyline just seemed to come out of nowhere and speak to the current fragments that I was writing, and say, this is the backdrop for this. This is, you're looking for a way that this character wants to punish herself, and this is kind of a death. She's looking for the death of the self. So it kind of happened intentionally, but also accidentally.
Yeah, that's fascinating. It existed originally as a novel. So these fragments you started writing. What made you decide to produce it as a play before? I'm assuming you didn't try to get it published as a novel first, but what made you decide to produce it as a play?
So I was doing a playwrights unit in Toronto with Nightwood Theatre through their Write from the Hip program. And I was working on a piece that I was struggling with. I was having writer's block with it, primarily because the play heavily featured a gun as a prop, couldn't really move forward without that prop, at least not the way that I constructed it. And I went to spend some time with family in Florida. And I think I arrived there maybe a week or two after the Parkland shootings happened. There were a few years at the high school. I remember like I, booked off a month of time to go down and intensively work on this play. And the news cycle there all the time was about gun control. And I was watching these amazing high school students lobbying and lobbying and lobbying against, the current rules there, which were horrific, and lobbying for harsher, stricter gun control. And I just had such a block about the prop in my play, and I didn't want to bring another gun into the world, even a fake one. And so it was just creating this barrier for me that I felt like I need to step away from this piece. I can't work on it right now. So I emailed Andrea Donaldson, who was running the program at the time, said, this is the problem I'm having. I'd like to work on something else. And she said, well, you're about halfway through the year. Do you have any other plays that you're developing? And I said, not right now.
Yeah.
She said, what else do you have? And I said, well, I have this other thing I've been working on. And at the time it was written to be a prose manuscript. And so I took a look at it, thought maybe this could be a solo show, added some stage direction, sent it to her. And she was really interested in the piece, said, okay, yeah, switch, we'll work on this. And so that is how it accidentally became a play. But then I had the really fortunate experience to perform in the play here in St. John's, or I should say here, I'm on the west side of the island right now, but here in Newfoundland, Labrador, in St. John's at the Geo Center, which for anyone who hasn't been there is this subterranean science museum under Signal Hill. And it's a really amazing space. And we were able to do it in a sort of found location under these giant planets that they have in that space that we didn't bring in as set, they were already there. And so I performed this play under what felt like the cosmos, and lit beautifully. And it was the loneliest experience I've ever had. It was kind of a lonely play to begin with, but I had the experience and the realization that I didn't get into theater to do this alone. Right. I didn't want to stand up here by myself. This is awful. Where's my scene partner? So there's something about the lack of sharing the space with somebody, the lack of give and take of energy, that I've never really wanted to be the center of attention. It's not a reason, believe it or not, that I got into acting. It's something I've always shied away from. So in doing it, I realized as well that there were certain things in the script that I felt were stronger on the page that I couldn't convey as an actor or as a playwright. And so when it came time, once the show was over, which I was really proud of, I had an amazing team working on it. It was produced by White Rooster Theater, and everyone involved did such a great job and supported me so well. But when it came time to think about the next step for this and publication, I wanted to bring it back to prose and let people engage with it in that way, because I didn't necessarily know that it needed a live experience. It's just a lonely piece that I almost like the idea of people sitting with it individually and ingesting it that way.
And it's funny because when I first read it, before I did a dive into its previous life and everything, I felt like it had these and I'm not a theater person, but I felt like it had these like dramaturgical moments, like she's kind of set the scene. Velvet, as she's known, she's kind of set the scene of her life, right? Like everything has its meaning, the letters have their meaning, but we don't, she chooses, the narrator chooses to not share the responses to those letters, even though we hope there's a response to some of the gross mansplaining letters, but we don't get those. And then the decision to go to an Airbnb in the middle of nowhere. So were those kind of setting Velvet up as dramaturge in her life? Was that a conscious thing, or is that just like Meghan the actor, or actress Meghan the actor?
That's a really interesting question. I think I had a lot of just technically dramaturgical support for this from the outside. I've had a lot of eyes on the development of this piece, for which I feel really grateful that I had all of that insight. before I ever approached it to edit it as a piece of prose. There's something about it that, and I think I've gone back to the original text and added a lot of things that we ended up trimming for the play, because it could almost work as a radio play. She describes everything. Something that was really important to me was the reconstruction of events, because she is suffering from, PTSD from a sexual assault that happened. Sorry, some spoilers, but she's also dealing with guilt from something she views as an atrocity that she committed. And so all she has really is her memory of events. And I wanted her to like tell the story as she remembers it, as so many victims are forced to do, to reconstruct, to go back, to relive, to put piece together, piece together, piece together, piece together. So describing all of those things felt like a really integral part of the story. Yeah, not sure if that answers the question, but
yeah, no, I'm not even sure if it was a question. I think I just wanted I don't know. I just wanted to acknowledge that it definitely had this kind of theatrical movement to it, the novel as a whole.
thank you.
So this is going to be probably an impossible question to answer, but I'm so impressed by your acting, directing, playwriting. You're now a novelist and hopefully going to give us more fiction. You've got an upcoming short film that you wrote and star in, and I just want to know which comes first for you, if there's any way of answering that question as an artist, as a creative spirit, I guess. Is there one of those that fills you up more than the other?
I think it shifts for me often. I go through periods of my life where, and it sort of depends on the projects that I come across as well, the opportunities that I have. And I'll find myself in certain stretches where I'm doing a fair bit of directing or I'm doing a fair bit of acting. And it always feels refreshing to go back to that thing and devote a certain period of time to it. It is challenging sometimes because if I focus on one thing, I tend to miss the other things. Like right now I'm teaching, which I love, amazing theater students at the university here at Grenfell, and I'm directing a show and doing, other dramaturgy gigs as well, but I don't have a lot of writing time because of that. But I think that if I had to choose, I would say writing is feels like the most sacred, I guess, to me. There's something really special to me about the process of, now it's different for playwriting, prose obviously, but this is the first time, the first time I've ever published a singular title that this is the final product, unlike the plays that I've written that are designed to exist in another form. They're designed to be lifted off the page. They're designed to have a collaborative team of artists. And I've loved that. It's one of the things that draws me to playwriting. I like the community of theater. I like the fact that other people's artistic visions are all gonna, boil together in a pot to make something. And it is something that I find challenging about prose sometimes. But then again, the reward of it, I guess, is being able to hold a finished product in my hands.
Yeah, that's funny that it just made me think about when you held this up and said this final product. It just made me think of the conversations that I've had a lot with writers who wish the current writer could go back to an older piece and change it and add different emotional aspects to it. So that's interesting. I'd love for you to talk about Dogberry. It's a short film that's coming out that you wrote and acted in. Yeah. What's it about?
That was actually based on a short story that I wrote a long time ago, and I think it may have been my first published piece ever. It was published in Riddle Fence, which is a literary journal in St. John's in Newfoundland and Labrador. And I currently work there as the nonfiction editor, part-time. But it was published in that. And then when I was at York quite a long time ago, one of not my classmates, he was in the direction stream, Sean Garrity decided to adapt it for a film project. It's sort of been in development limbo for a long time, but hopefully hopefully someday it'll come out. But yeah, it also had its start as a prose piece, strangely enough. And I'm not saying that I will never want to be a screenwriter. I think that I had maybe a negative experience studying it through school,
Right.
especially going through coming from Newfoundland, where theater is very hands-on. It's not unusual for everyone to be multidisciplinary, to do many different things. Like recently in my life, I've become a set designer, I've done props, I even did costumes
Right.
once. Like, it's really normal to you know, build a life through all these different things. And I feel really grateful that I'm able to follow all of those curiosities without being put into a box of Megan does this, Megan does that. It's not really the case here, so much as it is in other parts of the country. But there's something really removed for me about the process of screenwriting. It feels like the writer is very far from the final product. There's so much money involved in the making of film. And I think the capitalistic requirements of filmmaking just make me a little less compelled to do it. So yeah, it's not something that I'm really actively pursuing. Maybe someday I'll, you know, have a film that needs to be written, but I definitely love the live experience of theater. I love the ephemeral nature of it, that it's always different. So yeah, it's just always been where my heart is.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Screenwriting always, I only took 2 classes in my both university experiences, but it always felt, as you said, like you're creating something that the audience is expecting, rather than creating something that the audience isn't expecting, if that makes any sense. It's like the structure and all the kind of like elemental design of a screenplay is to fulfill the expectations of the audience, rather than to like surprise them with something like you would experience at a theater, at a live theater.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. And surprise is something that's really important to my practice and something I talk about all the time as a dramaturg or writer or director or anything. I think that surprising an audience is so, it's a thing I love as an audience member. And it's always the thing I'm trying to do, regardless of what, whether I'm working as a, you know, in prose or playwriting or anything. I think that I just want to be in the room. I want to see when people are surprised. There's a part in the introduction to Fleabag, the amazing play turned TV show.
Yeah.
Phoebe Waller-Bridge talks about how they used to do these radical experiments, her and her creative partner, where they would do sort of experimental short plays and gauge audience reaction, where they would give them a red balloon and ask them to release it when I think it was like when you notice the characters fall in love, or maybe when you fall in love with the character. So they had visual cues in real time of how the audience was responding to something. And I think that kind of experimentation and witnessing surprise and witnessing discovery is just so fascinating as a creator, and it's the thing that I want, the thing I want to do. So yeah, the idea of doing that in film, it just feels like you're so far removed from the final product that I don't know, I just want to be in the room.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. My daughter graduated from the National Theatre School, and one of the actors not in her program, a year ahead of her, was like bar none, she said, the most impressive person she's ever met, and she was from Newfoundland. She knew everything about theater when she came there, and my daughter knew what she knew, not, you know, saying she didn't know anything, but she was so impressed by this person from Newfoundland, whose name, of
I'm
course,
curious
I
to
can't
know.
remember,
Look
nor
at
should
that.
I name.
I would probably know them. It's small place.
Yeah, I think she moved back after graduation. So
Okay.
anybody who graduated in 2021 from Newfoundland, it will be
Yeah.
her. Thank you so much. I want to talk to you about what you're working on right now, although you've said you're not working on it right now, but is there a piece of prose, a piece of writing sitting on your computer that calls you every day, whether or not you can get back to it? But Kaylee, I'm not sure if there's any questions. I don't want to hog the Q&A with my questions, if there are any questions from people joining us today.
None just yet, just Terry's inquiry about the actor, and I'm gonna see if I can find them.
I'm sorry. They graduated a year before my daughter, so it's 2021, I
I
think.
think I know who it is. I'm not going to say any names in case I'm wrong, but I think I know.
No, yeah, she's I know if Kaylee looks it up and finds it, yeah, absolutely fantastic. Like almost made my daughter want to move to Newfoundland. As soon as she found out that she was going back, she's like, maybe I'll just move to Newfoundland.
Well, I strongly encourage everyone to move to Newfoundland. We have a thriving theater industry here for the size of the place.
Yeah, except as I said to you before we started this program, my sister's working just outside of Marystown right now and can't open her front door.
True. That's always it sounds like. But the summers are beautiful.
Yeah, no, I think we went, I can't remember, I think we went in May, and it was absolutely like one of those times where it's like if you go to Scotland and it doesn't rain for 3 days, you think to yourself, this is the most beautiful place on the planet. And then when it starts raining, you think, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
So let's talk about what you're working on right now, if you could work on it. What's sitting in your laptop calling you?
So I'm working on two things that I'm sporadically working on whenever I get time. One of them is a play that doesn't yet have a title that I'm happy with, but I'm developing it through Poverty Cove, which is a playwrights unit, playwright theater company run by Meghan Greeley, who is an amazing playwright and author from the province. And she's running a playwrights unit for professional play development. And so I'm working on a play through that is sort of a very broad, very over the top comedy, maybe a dark comedy about two queer queens who are, one of them is very, very, very far down in the line of succession. And one day, through a series of ridiculous deaths, she finds out that she's going to be the queen. And so it's an examination of monarchy and patriarchal structures that are not built for queerness, and whether queerness can exist within those models, or whether you need to take it all down and build it all from the ground up. Like, what does it mean to have children as a queer couple if your bloodline is so important? What does it mean to be head of the church if it's legal to get married but not acceptable in the church? All these kinds of ethical questions that they're dealing with in the funniest, kind of stupidest way. And I'm also working on a prose, a novel that's about a group of children. It's sort of loosely set in my hometown of Corner Brook. Not exactly, the landscape is a little different, but it's definitely inspired by the place, because there's a mill in the setting of my novel, and it follows a group of children in the aftermath of a flood. And the mill has a big part to play in the flood because it's winter, there's extreme climate change, and although it doesn't really ever name that, but petrified logs have sunk to the bottom of the bay, which actually has happened here because they used to run the logs down the river for such a long time. A lot of that wood has drifted to the bottom, and there have actually been some talks about how to get that wood up and use it because it's so well preserved. So anyway, that creates a barrier, it creates a huge flood, and it follows this group of children who form this basically a nuclear family, and then they struggle within it because they've lost their family members. They come together because the youngest one of them she knows her parents are dead, but she's so young that she doesn't grasp the concept of death yet. So them coming together starts with them being like, how do we explain death to this little girl when they're all children themselves? So it follows them as they reinvent the world for themselves, assign themselves parts of, the mother, the father, grandmother, grandfather, brother, sister, and they struggle within those roles when they don't feel right. And it's kind of an exploration of like coming of age identity, and as they try to reconstruct education for themselves, reconstruct religion for themselves, reconstruct government for themselves. So it's all these imaginary games that they're playing, but they're, you know, children in this extreme situation, and no one's really paying attention to them because everyone around them is grieving.
That, so, oh my God, both of those things are just like so emotionally like beautiful. I can't wait. I can't wait for them to happen.
Thank you.
Now I'm like, maybe Memorial will give you a sabbatical and you can work on those. That's fantastic. Kaylee has put a name in the chat to me specifically, but I'm afraid. I'm mostly afraid of my daughter, who may very well go, "Ah, why would you mention her? Why would you talk about me at all, ever?" Yeah. That's it. Thank you so much. We are going to raffle off a copy of Jawbone from Radiant Press. I wish everybody here the best of luck because it truly is. It's small and mighty, as I said. Kaylee will do the raffle, and then I'll talk about events that are coming up for us, and that you should go to the White Rooster website and see what fantastic plays are coming there. Kaylee?
Okay, our winner for today is Heidi Tiedemann DeRoche. Last names are always very hard. Many first names I've heard before, last names are tricky. And I know that Heidi was in just before. I think that she may have just dropped out, but we can reach out and get in touch with her.
Yeah, I will send her an email. Congratulations, Heidi, if you're listening to this at any point in time. Meghan, thank you so much for joining us. It truly was a pleasure. I'm excited for everything that you're working on. I'm excited for your students, and I'm excited for this book. I really do hope that people read it and rush out. You can go to indiebookstores.ca to find out where you can buy it locally at a local independent bookstore, or you can go to radiantpress.ca. They sell it directly from their website. And that is it for us. I am back. I have two First 30 live Instagram events coming up, March 24th with Brandon Reed, April 4th with Melia McClure. And then we're back at Type Books in person on April 28th with Danila Botta, Dave Herlo, and Michael Marola. And that is all. Thank you so much. Is there anything that we didn't talk about that you want everyone here to know? Is there anything that you want people to follow?
I would like to say that I'm very grateful to Radiant Press for publishing such a slim novel. I love novellas and short novels, and it's something that a lot of publishers won't touch. And not only did they publish it and support me in it, but they put so much effort into this beautiful cover. I don't know if you can tell from this, but there's this effect on the cover that really blew me away when I finally held it in my hand. So yeah, I've been really, really lucky to work with them. And so highly recommend, if there are any authors here looking to submit their books anywhere, Radiant has been nothing but wonderful to me.
Yes, and any authors listening who don't have a fantastic publisher or publicist, River Street Writers, River Street Writing, I think Holly is here.
Also amazing, amazing.
Yes.
Publicist. Also
Yes.
done so much for me.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again, Meghan. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Kaylee, for all that you do. Thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. And we'll see you again.
Thanks so much for having me.
Virtually or in person. Thank you. Have a great night.
Good night.
Bye, everyone.